At a dust-choked flea market, Nathan, a college student obsessed with vintage relics, uncovered a worn VHS tape labeled Home 1995. When he pressed play, his breath caught. The footage revealed the very house where he'd spent his childhood. At first, the scene seemed tender, familiar. Family birthdays, laughter, warm lights spilling across the kitchen table. But as the tape played on, faces began to blur into hollow shadows, and Nathan himself appeared in moments he had no memory of ever living. Nathan had an unusual obsession, collecting obsolete electronics. While his friends spent money on the newest consoles or sleek sound systems, he sought out dust-caked relics, especially VHS players. He often joked that he had been born in the wrong decade, meant for the 1990s, rather than the age of the internet. One gray Saturday morning, Nathan wandered through a flea market on the outskirts of town. The sky hung heavy, the wind snapping tops against rusted poles, carrying with it the sour tang of metal and mildew. He drifted past a stall, cluttered with old pop CDs, cassette tapes, and stacks of unlabeled VHS cassettes, their plastic cases dulled and scratched. Among the chaos, one tape caught his eye. A black cassette with a yellowed sticker scrawled in marker, Home 1995. The vendor, a weary-looking man with hollow eyes, gave a dry chuckle when Nathan picked it up. That one used to belong to a strange family. If you want it, take it. Came in with a whole lot. No one dares play it anymore. Nathan frowned, but curiosity eclipsed doubt. He handed over a few dollars, slid the tape into his backpack, and made his way back to his dorm room. Inside, the battered VHS player sat waiting. As he wiped the dust from the case, he felt as if he were opening a door into the past. The television flickered, static hissing and growling until the picture steadied. A birthday party appeared on screen. A child leaned forward to blow out candles on a frosted cake, balloons bobbing in the background. Laughter echoed, warped but distinct. Nathan tilted his head. The kitchen in the video looked uncannily familiar. The wooden table, the pale yellow curtains, the red patterned tablecloth. They matched perfectly the house of his childhood in Michigan. His chest tightened. He tried to dismiss it as coincidence, but as the images sharpened, so did the memories. The old wall, clock, the vase his mother kept on the corner table. "No way," he whispered, eyes fixed to the glow. The tape jumped to a new scene, Thanksgiving dinner. A golden brown turkey glistened under the warm glow of a ceiling lamp. The family at the table smiled, laughing in casual ease. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary, until Nathan noticed a detail that froze his blood. In the corner of the frame sat a boy, silent, unmoving, his wide eyes staring directly into the camera. That boy was him. Nathan lurched forward, heart hammering. His memory was empty of this moment. He had never sat at a Thanksgiving table like the one playing before him.
But the turkey was looking
back. The face, the haircut, the striped sweater, there was no mistaking it. The screen rippled with static, then steadied again. Nathan's trembling hand stopped the tape. The room was deathly still, broken only by the low mechanical hum of the VHS player. He leaned back, dragging air into his lungs, telling himself it was all a bizarre coincidence. But deep down, he knew this was no ordinary home video. The tape wasn't just recording some forgotten family. It was reaching into him, into memories he was certain he had never lived. Eerie. Nathan couldn't tear himself away from the tape. After the first night, he wrapped it up, shoved it deep into a drawer, and tried to forget. But by midnight, he lay restless, thoughts circling endlessly around the boy's face, his own face, caught forever on that grainy footage. Before dawn, unable to bear the pressure any longer, he snapped upright, slid the cassette into the machine, and pressed play. The black screen flickered, and a new scene bled through. The same house, but the light had changed, thicker, oppressive, as if shadows had swallowed the walls. The camera drifted across the dining table, where the family gathered. Nathan's breath hitched. His parents were there, unmistakably, but their faces blurred into smudged darkness, smiles warped into grotesque curves, their eyes nothing but deep black hollows. A chill spread through his chest. In the frame, the boy, his younger double, still sat perfectly still, rigid and silent. The camera crept closer, inexorably zooming in. The boy's eyes locked forward, staring not at the lens, but through it. Nathan felt the shift instantly. He was no longer watching. He was being watched. His hand shot out, slamming the pause button. The image froze, the faceless family stiff as wax dolls. Yet sound still leaked from the speakers, thin, rasping whispers, looping again and again. Not laughter, not background noise. Words, barely audible, but there. Come back, stay home. Sweat stung Nathan's forehead. He jammed the stop button. The screen fell into blackness. Silence closed in, broken only by the low mechanical hum of the VHS spinning down. He sat frozen, heart battering his ribs as if it wanted out. Those blurred faces, those hollow eyes, those voices calling him back. None of it felt like the record of strangers. It was his, bound to him, as though the tape had reached into his past and twisted it into something unrecognizable. With shaking hands, Nathan flooded the room with light, yanked the tape from the player, and locked it in his desk drawer. Out of sight, out of reach. But even in darkness, with wood and metal between him and the cassette, he could feel it waiting. Patient, demanding. And it would not stop until he pressed play again. That night, Nathan couldn't sleep. He lay rigid in bed, trying to banish the memory of those faces swallowed by shadow. But the harder he pushed them away, the tighter they clung. When exhaustion finally dragged him under, he slipped into a dream unlike any other. He was standing in the kitchen of his childhood home. A jaundiced light spilled from above, carrying the faint scent of turkey and sugared cake. Around the dining table, figures sat perfectly still, their backs turned to him. Silent, motionless, like statues. Nathan crept closer and placed a trembling hand on one shoulder. Slowly, the figure turned. There was no face, only a smooth, featureless void of black. He woke with a violent gasp, his back slick with cold sweat. But the sight that greeted him froze his heart. The dull glow of a television screen flickered across his dorm room walls. He was certain, absolutely certain, he hadn't turned it on. On the static screen, white noise danced and hissed. It can't play by itself, Nathan whispered. He sat up slowly. The picture sharpened. Not the childhood house this time, but his dorm room, his desk, his chair, even the tiny scratch on the wall captured with perfect accuracy. His blood turned to ice. In the center of the frame stood an empty chair, positioned directly before the television, the very chair Nathan had been sitting in earlier. The image shook slightly, as if a hand held the camera and filmed in real time. Nathan lunged for the lamp switch, flooding the room with light. But he was alone. Heart racing, he yanked the power cord from the wall. The television should have died. It didn't. The screen glowed on, unwavering. The room within the image remained identical. And then, in the frame, a figure appeared. It slumped into the empty chair. A blurred silhouette, head bowed, shoulders trembling with the rhythm of a muffled laugh. Nathan staggered back, colliding with the wall. He blinked just once, and the picture collapsed into darkness. Static filled the screen again. He didn't dare move closer. For the first time in his life, Nathan understood that the border between memory, dream, and waking reality no longer existed. The tape was no longer showing his world. It was rewriting it. Yes. Nathan couldn't say when he'd finally fallen asleep. When he opened his eyes, the clock read nearly 3 in the morning. The room was a heavy, suffocating dark. Then a sound cut through it. Click, click. Steady, mechanical, like a tape being rewound inside the player. His heart pounded. He turned slowly. The VHS machine, unplugged, powerless, was running itself. The red power light blinked. The cassette spun, scraping with a dry, grinding hiss. Instinct shoved him forward. He lunged to yank the tape free. The moment his fingers brushed the plastic, the TV flared to life. No static now. The screen showed his room, clear, still, unnervingly precise, as if an invisible camera were filming every corner in real time. From the edge of the frame, a gray, ink-smeared hand reached for the empty chair. Long, crooked fingers trembled, leaving black smears like spilled ink across the fabric. Nathan froze. Sweat rolled down his temple. He looked toward the real chair in the room, empty. On the screen, the black shape lowered itself into the seat. A gaunt figure slumped forward, dressed in threadbare clothing from another age, hair matted over half its face. Its head turned, slowly, with a deliberate, bone-slow motion, fixing its gaze straight into the camera. And Nathan understood. It was looking at him. A new sound began, a slow tap, 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 as if someone were rapping a knuckle against the inside of the glass. The taps multiplied, quickening into a frantic staccato. Each knock made the screen tremble and warp, the glass seeming to strain as if about to shatter. Nathan backed away, legs trembling. The knocking grew louder, layered with a chorus of whispers, drawn out and pleading. Come back, come back. No longer buried in noise, but a single, unmistakable command. He screamed, lunged for the outlet, yanking cords free, tearing cables from sockets. The room should have gone dark. It didn't. The television burned on. The silhouette remained, seated, smiling with a mouth split open in a grin. From the screen, black blood began to seep, thick and glossy, trailing down the glass and pooling onto the floor of his room. Nathan collapsed backward, the world tilting. He felt trapped inside a door being forced open from both sides, one leading to everything he knew, the other to the warped memories the tape fed. That door was opening wider, and it was hungry for him. Nathan no longer knew where he stood. The dorm room warped and bled away, its walls sagging like melted wax before reassembling into crumbling brick, the walls of his childhood home. But it wasn't warm as memory had promised. It was ruined, dim, and suffocating with the stench of mold. In front of him sat the old television, its screen blazing white. The shadow was still there, but now it had taken a shape. The face was a grotesque reflection of Nathan himself, eye sockets hollow and endless, the mouth split wide, dragging back toward the ears in an impossible grin. "Nathan," the voice hissed from the speakers, buried in static. "You belong here." He tried to scream, to run, but his legs were nailed into the rotting floorboards. Each breath tore through his chest like shards of glass, cutting him from within. The screen flickered. Now it showed him another Nathan, sitting lifeless in the dorm room, eyes vacant, dried blood cracking at the corners of his mouth. That figure turned its head with deliberate slowness, staring directly into the lens, straight through the screen, straight into the trembling Nathan outside. And he understood. The exchange was complete. What remained in the world was an empty husk, while his true self was trapped forever inside the VHS tape. Then came the knocking. Thud, thud, thud. But this time, it wasn't from the television. It came from behind. He spun around. Every door in the ruined house creaked open. Beyond them sat the faceless figures from his dreams, motionless around the dining table. Together, they turned their hollow voids toward him. In that final collapsing moment, their mouths opened, and from their throats poured his own voice, cold, inescapable. "Welcome home." The television snapped to black, and the thick, dark swallowed everything. Maybe it's our fault. This happened 4 years ago. I was 12, going on 13 in just a month or two. My friend Lindsay was 14, which was quite a bit older than me, at least at the time, as the 2-year age gap was pretty big. We met in school and quickly became close friends. We were spending almost every single weekend together. Nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. It was your typical Friday night. We carpooled to her family's apartment after school to spend the night together. After we ate dinner, me and Lindsay went to go hang out in her room. Now, Lindsay wasn't always a positive influence. She had a habit of talking to older guys online and lying about her age. Lindsay showed me some texts between her and a man she was talking to. I don't remember exactly what they said, but they consisted of him trying to convince her to meet up with him, and just the usual things you'd expect from a creep online. According to him, he was 19, tall, and blonde. Once I saw the text, I asked for a picture of him. Something didn't sit right with me after seeing the messages. She showed me what he looked like, and he was very clearly not 19. The man was at least 40, and looked like he lived in his mother's basement. That's when Lindsay's phone started ringing. It was the guy. Lindsay answered without hesitation, and when I heard the voice on the other end of the call, I felt like I was going to be sick. I could clearly hear the guy trying to convince Lindsay to meet up with him. Lindsay replied, saying she couldn't, because she was spending the night with a friend. The mention of that must have sparked his interest, as the guy then proceeded to try and ask to meet both of us. Lindsay, lacking any common sense, said yes, and thus began our plan to sneak out and walk to meet this random guy in a Chick-fil-A parking lot. I obviously didn't want to go. I was raised on stories of what happens to teen girls who meet random men from the internet in person. But after adamant pleading from Lindsay that she didn't feel safe going by herself, I agreed. We took our phones with us for the walk. The route we had to take to get there didn't have very many street lamps, and there weren't any houses. We were surrounded by trees on both sides of us. When we got to the parking lot, it was almost empty. The Chick-fil-A was about 15 minutes from closing, and since Lindsay hadn't received a text from the guy saying he was there yet, we decided to go inside. We ordered some milkshakes and went to go sit in one of the booths while we waited. But while we were sitting inside, I couldn't help but notice a car pulling into the parking lot, just continually circling the building. The car clearly wasn't looking for a parking spot, as it went around the building very slowly, around 10 times. All the while, me and Lindsay were just watching it from inside. After we finished our milkshakes, the car was gone, and Lindsay never got a text from the guy saying he was there. So we just decided to head back home. I was honestly insanely relieved that the guy never ended up showing up. But as we were walking home, I couldn't help but notice how many times a car passed us. The street we walked on to get back was almost completely desolate, with trees on either side of us, so to have even 2 cars pass us would have been rare. But I ignored it. It didn't look like Lindsay even noticed. We got home, and since it was late, we decided to just go to bed in Lindsay's room. Fast forward to around 4 a.m., we woke up to a loud bang. It sounded like someone smacking on the window, though Lindsay's room was on the 2nd floor, meaning something must have been thrown. Me and Lindsay both sat up and looked at each other. The sound came again, that same bang. We both agreed someone had to have been outside. And just then we heard the heart-dropping sound of a voice whispering, "Hey Lindsay, it's me. I followed you guys home." We both instantly panicked in reaction. We knew exactly who that was. I started crying. I was honestly terrified. Lindsay ran to her parents' room and explained the situation. Her parents instantly called the police, but of course, when they showed up, the guy was gone. Lindsay went to show them the conversations, but the account was deleted. Neither of us remembered the username either, so there was quite literally nothing the cops could do to take a report. The whole encounter was really disturbing. Lindsay's parents were really mad with her, and this caused me to lose connection with her as a friend over the next few months. I haven't seen her in a while. I'm not entirely sure whatever ended up happening with the whole situation. I just hope that guy never returned. My wife and I were looking for a used car on Facebook Marketplace, and actually found one we were really interested in. It was honestly a really good deal, and as soon as we saw it, we texted the seller saying we were interested. The seller seemed perfectly normal over text, and we agreed to meet in a public mall parking lot. He said he wouldn't be available until he got off work at 5, so we agreed to do the transaction at 5:30. Come 5:30, and we arrive at the mall, telling the seller what car we were in, just to get a text saying he was running late. We weren't in any hurry, and we figured he'd only be like 30 minutes or so. We both agreed it'd be a good idea to go into the mall and get some food at the food court while we waited. A good 2 hours went by, both of us pretty impatient at this point. That's when we got a text saying the guy would be at the mall soon. This was in late fall, so it was already getting dark, and we were starting to worry that the mall wouldn't be as busy soon. A little bit later, the guy texted us saying we should meet him at another location about 30 minutes away, in a rougher area of the city. I looked up the address and found it was a gas station right off the interstate. What caught my eye was the hours. It wasn't one of those 24-hour gas stations, and they were actually already closed. My wife mentioned how many red flags the whole situation was giving off, but honestly, all I was thinking about was the car and how good of a deal we had found, so we ignored them. We sent over a text saying we'd be there in 30 minutes and pulled out of the mall parking lot, making our way to the gas station. When we got there, we pulled into the parking lot and quickly realized how dead the whole area was. There were only like a few vehicles parked. After about a minute, my wife pointed out the car, and sure enough, there it was. But it looked to be in way worse condition than the original pictures on Facebook Marketplace. The car was in a pretty dark spot in the parking lot, way in the back. I started pulling up to it when I stopped. My wife looked at me confused, but I swear I could see something. I got out of the car, and that's when my suspicion was confirmed. There was a spike strip right in the middle of the road, exactly where I would need to go to pull up next to the car. At that point, I knew something wasn't right. I got back in the car, backed up, and left the way I came. Once I got back home, I reported the whole situation to the cops. Though I never even saw anyone, the only evidence I could give was the ad itself. I never knew what came of the whole situation, but the ad was taken down a few days later. I never heard back from the cops, so if they caught anyone or not, I don't know. Either way, this situation has caused me to be a lot more cautious when using services like Facebook Marketplace. I had just moved into a new apartment, and being the broke post-grad I was, I had pretty much nothing except a few boxes of stuff from my parents' house. It was nice to be done with school and have my own place, yeah, but I didn't even have any furniture. Like I said, I was completely broke, so I thought maybe I'd be able to find something at least decent on the free section of Facebook Marketplace. If you've ever searched for furniture on Facebook Marketplace, you know it's not great. Half the couches are held up with duct tape or something along those lines. I knew I couldn't be picky, but I wanted something that could at least last me until I had enough money to buy a nice one. I'd been scrolling for well over an hour, and was probably already a week into the backlogs. I scrolled back to the top and refreshed the page. The second I did, I saw an ad pop up titled, "Brand new couch, never used, free for pickup." The post wasn't even a minute old, and I knew I had to be quick if I was going to have a chance at getting this thing. The couch was in perfect condition. I quickly typed out a response to the seller, saying I'd be willing to take it off their hands. I got a response not even 3 minutes later that read, "Yeah, the couch is all yours if you can come pick it up tonight. I'm available anytime past 9 p.m. I was slightly put off by the response. It was currently noon, and this guy wanted me to wait till 9 p.m. to pick it up, way past when the sun would have gone down. But I ignored it, thinking maybe the guy had work till then or something. So I texted him back saying that was fine and proceeded to wait. Come 8:30, I sent over a text to the guy saying I was on my way. I typed in the guy's address and quickly realized he lived in the middle of nowhere. Now, I live right next to the Rocky Mountains, so yeah, there aren't that many people nearby, but this guy was seriously in the middle of nowhere. My GPS said it would take 45 minutes to get there, so I quickly set off. As I drove, the housing development slowly became less and less free. Sure enough, there was an actually decent-looking house, but there was no other civilization for at least a few miles. Somehow, I had service and was able to send out a text telling the guy I was there. Not even 10 seconds later, I got a response simply saying, "Okay." I figured that was this guy's way of telling me he was ready, so I walked up to the front door. I knocked on the door, to which someone responded in a muffled voice. "The door's unlocked. Come on in." From the way the voice sounded, it was as if whoever said it was right on the other side of the door. I opened the door and peeked inside before entering. I quickly realized how weird this situation was. The place was pitch black, with not a single light on. Now, this was before every cell phone had a flashlight on it. So literally all I could use to help me see was the moonlight shining in from one of the windows. I yelled out a hello, to which I could hear someone responding from a door on my left that was open, and I could tell it led to a basement. The voice said, "Come on down here. I got the couch ready to be moved." At this point, I was completely on edge. I replied saying, No, that's okay. I gotta go." I turned around, swung open the front door, and started running back to my car. I unlocked it, got in, and proceeded to relock the doors. I gave one last glance at the house before leaving. No one had chased me, though through one of the windows I could see the dark outlines of 4 different men just looking out at my car. I booked it out of there at that point and drove straight back to my apartment. When I got back, I checked my phone to see I had 3 new messages from the guy's number. The first one asked why I left, followed by one asking if I still wanted the couch. But the third one is what disturbs me most. It simply read, "You're lucky." This is by far the most disturbing experience of my life, and it's caused me to never use Facebook Marketplace or anything similar again. To this day, I'm convinced those guys in that house that night never had the intention to sell me a couch. A few weeks ago, I had to fly out to a small town I'd never been to before in order to look for a place to live at for school. I was flying alone, though before the trip I had researched all sorts of apartments in the area on Facebook Marketplace and was actually able to set up a few meetings to look at places. The first meeting was in the late afternoon, in a sort of remote residential area. The landlord sounded fine over email and asked me to call him an hour before meeting him to confirm I was coming. And so I did just that. I called him an hour before, but he didn't answer. I decided to just start walking to the house and hope the landlord would show up by the time I got there. About an hour later, the guy called me. He asked me if I was still coming, to which I replied, "Yeah, I'm actually only about 5 minutes away." Though the guy's reply caught me completely off guard, he replied furious, saying I wasn't supposed to show up for another hour. I quickly realized he was right. Back then, I had a pretty old phone. It wouldn't automatically change times whenever you switched time zones. I forgot to change it manually, and I realized I was showing up an hour early. I explained the situation to the guy over the phone, but I could tell the dude was furious. Now, I get I was in the wrong, but still, getting that mad over something as small as this seemed weird to me. I explained to the guy I'd be willing to just stay outside of the house till the agreed upon time, to which he quickly replied saying no, almost pleading with me. At this point, alarms were going off in my head, but I ignored them as I really needed a place to live. I decided I'd just go get some food at a nearby place to pass the time until I needed to be at the house for the tour. Once the time came for the tour, I showed up to meet the guy. The guy looked to be in his 50s, and if I'm being honest, he looked disgusting. Some of his clothes were half torn, and it didn't even look like he showered for weeks. I didn't feel comfortable, and found myself just wanting to leave, though, like I said, I really needed to find somewhere to live, and there weren't that many choices in terms of real estate at that point, so I decided to stay. As I was discussing the details about the house with the guy, I couldn't help but notice a man leave the house from a back exit. This man was young and extremely sketchy looking, even more so than the guy I was talking to. He took one look at us, ran out of the house to his car, and pulled away. At this point, I was full-on disturbed. I asked the guy who that was, to which he replied it was another person he was giving a tour to earlier. The guy then proceeded to ask me a lot of questions. They weren't normal questions a landlord would ask, but rather more personal questions, like how old I was or what I was going to school for, the whole time staring into my eyes without blinking. I tried to give answers that were as vague as possible. Finally, we entered the house. Now, from the outside, the house actually looked decent, but upon entering, you could tell the place wasn't taken good care of. I followed the guy as we walked around the house, looking at all the rooms. Every time I would ask about the condition of the house, the guy would avoid the question, simply saying it was unfinished. After we finished looking at all the rooms, the guy mentioned he wanted to show me a shed in the backyard of the house. Before I could say anything, the guy told me to follow him as he led me to the back of the house, outside, away from the street, to this sort of detached shed. When we got there, he opened the door, and I quickly noticed that there were stairs leading down into utter darkness. He flipped on a switch at the top of the stairs, but no light came on. Normally the response for this would be surprise, or something like that. But he didn't say anything and just started slowly walking down into the utter darkness, as if he expected no light to come on. The guy was now just standing there at the bottom of the stairs in the dark and said, "Aren't you coming down?" I said nothing, still in shock that the landlord wanted me to follow him down into this dark basement, cut off from the rest of the house for whatever reason. I glanced back at the house and saw another guy in the backyard doorway. I panicked and ran into the woods. I didn't look back, and honestly, I didn't want to. I don't know if they followed me, but after about a half-mile of running, I turned around to find no one. I quickly realized the situation I was in. I was in the middle of the forest at sunset, with people possibly chasing me. Though luckily, my phone had service, and I was able to find my way back to the hotel I was staying at with no other problems. As soon as I got back, I Googled the house and did some more research on it. Apparently, the house had been abandoned for 3 years. I checked the status of the original Facebook Marketplace posts I had responded to, but of course, it was deleted. I debated whether or not to call the cops and report the situation, but decided against it, as I figured there wasn't much they could do. I can only imagine the guys I encountered that night were a group of homeless people with some unknown intentions. Whatever the case, the whole situation was extremely disturbing. One of those long, dragging shifts where the clock seemed to move backward and the streets felt emptier than they had any right to. I'd been delivering food all week, weaving through the same neighborhoods, the same quiet houses, the same dimly lit apartment buildings. But this order was different. The address popped up on my phone just before midnight, a small gas station on the very edge of town. I knew the area, knew it wasn't the kind of place you went unless you had to. The parking lot, according to my memory, had no working lights. The stretch of road leading there was always darker than it should be, like the trees leaned in too close, swallowing what little glow the street lamps gave. When I pulled in, the place looked abandoned. Not closed, abandoned. The front windows were black, no sign of movement inside. Even the flickering neon sign out front seemed to give up halfway, sputtering once before dying completely, leaving the building hunched in shadow. I double-checked the address on my phone 3 times. This was it. The order instructions were short: side entrance. I stepped out of the car, every sound amplified in the stillness. Gravel crunching under my shoes. The faint hum of my car engine cooling. The air was colder than it had been on the drive over, and the smell of gasoline lingered faintly, mixing with something metallic I couldn't quite place. I walked around the corner, and that's when I saw him. Tall, but too tall. His shoulders were narrow, his body thin, almost fragile, but his presence filled the space like a shadow stretching over the ground. The skin on his face seemed a size too big, hanging loose over sharp cheekbones. His eyes reflected the meager light from somewhere, maybe a distant street lamp, but the way they glinted didn't feel human. He didn't greet me, didn't smile, didn't move in a way people usually do when they see another person. He just reached for the bag, his fingers long, stiff, almost jointless. His nails caught the light, and for a moment I thought they were wet. "I'll get my ID," he muttered, voice low and scratchy, as if it hadn't been used in a while. Then he turned, disappearing into the black mouth of the doorway. That was the moment my stomach dropped. The movement, it wasn't slow from laziness. It was slow because he was sure. Sure I would still be standing there when he came back. Sure I wouldn't run. My brain started painting pictures I didn't want to see. Headlines, missing person posters. My car sitting here in this dead lot for days. The driver's door open. My phone smashed on the ground. No, Doris. I set the bag down on the concrete, called out, "Orders here," and stepped back. My voice sounded small in the open space, like it was swallowed up before it could travel. No response, just silence. The kind of silence that makes you feel like you've already been noticed, like something is watching and waiting for you to move first. I turned. My keys were already in my hand. My other hand curled around the can of pepper spray in my pocket. I didn't run. I didn't walk slow either. Just steady steps, each one calculated, each one carrying me closer to the shadow where my car sat like a waiting lifeboat. I unlocked the door, slid inside, and locked it again in one smooth motion. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I started the engine. That's when my headlight swept across the side of the building. He was there, standing in the doorway, half in shadow, not moving toward me, not waving, just smiling. It wasn't the smile of someone happy to get their food. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting a long time for you and would be happy to wait longer. I drove off, tires crunching over gravel, heart hammering in my chest. I told myself not to look in the rearview mirror, but I did anyway. And I saw him. The red glow of my taillights lit his face just long enough to show those pale features again, before the darkness swallowed him whole. I never accepted another delivery to that address. But every now and then when I'm stuck at a red light on a quiet street, and the shadows feel just a little too close, I get the feeling that if I turned my head, I'd see him there. Still smiling. Still waiting. My brother asked me for a favor. Watch his dog, Cooper, for a few days while he was away on a work trip. His place wasn't just out of town. It was tucked deep into the woods, far from neighbors, streetlights, or even reliable cell service. I called it a cabin, but it was more like a normal house with a rustic feel. Cozy during the day, sure, but at night, the surrounding forest pressed in like a living thing. The first evening was uneventful. I fed Cooper, watched a movie, and went to bed early. But the second night, that's when things changed. It was around 11 p.m. The forest outside was silent, too silent. No wind, no crickets, nothing. I was lying on the couch, half watching an old film, when Cooper suddenly bolted upright. His ears pinned back, his fur bristled, and he let out this deep, guttural bark. The sound made my heart race. Cooper was staring at the front door like something was on the other side. I got up, whispering his name, but he wouldn't stop barking. Then, without warning, he turned and sprinted out through the dog door, disappearing into the night. "Cooper!" I shouted, grabbing a flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, but the forest seemed to swallow the light whole. I followed the sound of his barking into the trees, but each step I took made the sound fainter, until it stopped altogether. That's when I realized how far I'd gone. The cabin's glow was gone. I was surrounded by towering black shapes and the scent of damp earth. A twig snapped somewhere behind me. I turned the flashlight in time to catch the reflection of something, eyes low to the ground, watching me. But before I could move, the sound of a vehicle broke the silence. I walked toward the noise, hoping it was Cooper or maybe a late-night hunter. But instead, I found a pickup truck parked on the grass off the roadside. No lights, no driver, just sitting there in the dark. Weird, but maybe someone broke down. I kept walking, only to find another vehicle less than 2 minutes later. Different car, same eerie setup. Engine off, no one around, parked facing the trees. A creeping sense of wrongness settled over me. I turned back toward the cabin, picking up my pace. That's when I saw him. A tall man emerged from the tree line and stepped onto the road. His movements were slow, deliberate. Even from a distance, I could see something twitchy, off about him, like he couldn't stand still. He walked straight toward me, never breaking eye contact. My chest tightened. I called out, "Hey, you okay?" No response. When he was close enough for me to see the pale sheen of sweat on his face, my instinct screamed at me to run. I darted past him, heart pounding, and didn't stop until I saw the faint light of the cabin in the distance. Inside, I locked every door and window. Hours later, I found Cooper sitting on the porch, shaking, his fur matted with mud. I never found out what happened to him out there, or why those cars were parked in the middle of nowhere. But now, when I think back, I'm not sure what scares me more. What was in the woods with us, or what might still be there? I think till the handle. How? Ernie. They say the countryside is peaceful, but I've learned that in the dead of night, the silence feels unnatural. It was late autumn when I booked a small rental cabin for a weekend getaway. I needed time away from the city, a place to breathe, think, and maybe get some writing done. The online listing showed a cozy one-room space. Just a bed, a kitchenette, a couch, and a TV. Quaint, but charming. When I arrived, the air was crisp, the surrounding forest burning in shades of orange and red. By sunset, though, the trees turned into dark silhouettes, and the isolation became heavy. That first night, I cooked dinner, curled up on the couch, and drifted to sleep with the TV on. It was around 1:00 a.m. when I woke up, Not to a noise, but to a feeling. My chest felt tight, like I'd been holding my breath. The rain had stopped, and the silence outside pressed against the cabin walls. Then, knock, knock, knock. 3 sharp raps against the door. I froze. At first, I thought maybe it was the wind, a branch tapping the siding. But then it came again, louder. Knock. What? Knock. Danornia. Knock. Heart pounding, I grabbed my phone and checked the time. 1:17 a.m. I peeked through the blinds. The porch light was out, and beyond it, only darkness. Hello? I called. No answer. I remembered the cabin owner telling me about a few locals who sometimes passed through at night. Hunters, hikers, people who got lost. But I also remembered something else he'd mentioned casually when handing me the keys. A previous guest had a strange encounter here, but it was nothing to worry about. At the time, I didn't think to ask for details. The knocking stopped. I waited, holding my breath, until I heard footsteps circling the cabin. Slow, dot, deliberate, crunching over gravel and wet leaves. Something brushed against the window behind me. I spun around, but the curtains were drawn. My hand trembled as I reached for them, but before I could pull them back, knock, 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 from the other side of the room. They were moving around me. I backed into the center of the cabin, phone in hand, ready to call the police, but there was no service. Then I remembered the back door. I crept toward it, flashlight shaking in my grip. When I reached for the lock, I stopped. The door frame, it looked splintered, like someone had tried to force it open. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat on the couch with every light on, waiting for the sun. The next morning, when the owner stopped by to check in, I asked him directly about the previous incident. He sighed, looked around the cabin, and lowered his voice. Couple months ago, someone staying here heard knocking too. Middle of the night. They didn't open the door, but when they left in the morning, the door had been bashed in, like with a sledgehammer. They never found out who did it. I stared at him. You didn't call the police? He just shook his head. If word got out, no one would rent this place. That was the moment I realized something. Whoever was out there last night might come back. And if they did, I wasn't going to wait around to find out what they wanted. No one